trade has not yet officially been consummated. That involves DK and Pete Carroll taking their shirts off. But here is what the deal is. Rap sheet says Broncos send Russell Wilson and a fourth, or get Russell Wilson and a fourth. Seattle gets 2 1s, 2 2s, a fifth, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant. Shelby Harris is a defensive end. Okay, Noah Fant's a tight end. Drew Lock's a quarterback. Yep. Pretty shocking details, I would say, there. Just there. But I guessed in my head more is what was exchanged when I heard this trade was done.
Well, it's a bad tight end draft. A buddy from the Combine texted me when after the UCLA kid ran, and I just immediately text, first rounder? And he said, no, third. And I said, and then he responded, bad tight end class. Noah Fant, if you remember, was a first-round pick. He is a very talented guy with a lot of speed. That means he's got a fifth-year option. So that player in itself, to me, has value, Noah Fant. I'd say he's worth on the open market maybe a second-round pick, right? So I think you have to look at it like that. I think, say, the shocking part is they didn't get 3 1s. Mm-hmm. Now, as someone texts me or DM me about the 49ers trade relative to, like, other trades, they're like, when you give up picks, like this year the Niners for Trey Lance are giving Miami Dolphins, right, pick whatever, 29. That is not the same as the Denver Broncos. This is always why you do trades before the draft. Remember, we were very critical of the Khalil Mack trade because, and you saw it with the Lions, right? The Lions are picking 32. So you're going to give Matt Stafford away for pick 32 and let's say pick 26. That's not ideal. The Seattle does get pick 9. Now, I would say pick 9, the value of a pick is a little dependent on the talent in the draft. Now, the way we look at a draft before the draft and a couple years after obviously changes, but pick 9 is pretty valuable, right? They're going to say we're going to get an immediate impact starter, even though it's not a quarterback. It's not. There's no quarterbacks viewed going there, but you never know. So I'd say pick 9 and their second round pick, is pretty good too. So you get 2 valuable picks immediately in this draft. And then I had forgotten because I immediately go to Wiki because I was like, oh, where did the Denver Broncos pick? Well, I had forgotten that Seattle doesn't have a first-round pick. So it's not like they're coming in hot with 2 first-round picks because the Jets have their first-round pick. So it's
Jamal Adams.
It does show that, they're a little desperate. I think this also shows that Russell Wilson wanted out. Right? To me, it's not just Seattle wanted to get rid of him. Like, it's pretty clear Russell Wilson was done with Seattle. Now, he's lucky he didn't actually have to kind of go full Rodgers like last year and like totally demand, but I think it's fair to say he was pushing for this, right?
Yep.
And Seattle's like, fuck it, we're over it. Let's just move on. Though, when you see that compensation just written out, let's face it, it doesn't look like much, right?
No, it doesn't.
Easiest trade the Denver Broncos will ever make.
Keep in mind, by the way, it was February, just over a year ago, that Schefter said that Russ's agent said he would only go to the Cowboys, Saints, Raiders, and Bears. Right? He's not the Broncos are not the Cowboys, Saints, the Raiders, or the Bears. So things change. I'm with you. Like, for a blockbuster trade, as you said to me before we started, is this one of the biggest trades in NFL? Is this the biggest trade? It's definitely one of the biggest trades in NFL history. And part of, I think, what will make it big is what comes next. Seattle's clearly trading low on Russell, right? Now, part of this is Russell's contract, while it has 2 years left on it, doesn't have any guaranteed money this year or next. So you're probably going to have to pay him. Would you agree with that?
I think it's fair to say that this podcast believes he will get a $150+ million extension, this, right, April, May, June, sometime, right? Yeah. The Denver Broncos, all their chips are in the middle of the table on Russell Wilson, as they should be.
And they should be. And you could make the case if you were Seattle that you would not give Russ the contract that the Packers just gave. Part of the reason you wouldn't give it is because Russ doesn't want to be there. Denver, I thought once Aaron didn't force a trade to Denver was looking at quarterback purgatory. I mean, they were really in purgatory.
Well, they've been in it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so I got no issue with them doing this. I think they have to, and they are. And I don't think they're crazy to bet on a Russell Wilson bounce back. But I don't think if you had said, imagine at 4 games into 2021 when Russell was on pace to put together a historic season, saying Russell gets traded, and this is the compensation: 2 1s, 2 2s, a fifth, and like a quarterback that you don't think is the quarterback of the future, Drew Lock.
Not only right in the mix to win the MVP, they won the division the COVID year, right?
Yeah. But what was their record? What was the record?
12-4, and they hosted a playoff game. Now, in Seattle fashion, it wasn't like 12-4 blowing teams out. It was like they were squeaking by some teams. They've been weird for a while. I will say this, though. They went 3. People act like they're the Giants or the Jags. Like, oh, Seattle in fucking shambles. They swept the 49ers, who were, obviously, we'll talk about coming up, in the NFC Championship game. They beat the piss out of the Arizona Cardinals the last game of the season. They went 3-3 in the toughest division. And if you've watched, like we have, and probably a large percentage of the people listening to this, a lot of NFC West football, they play the NFC West with, and mainly because of him, they are in the mix in these games. Their problem is like they can lose to the Jets, they can lose to the Giants, they can lose to the Jags. They just have weird moments with weird teams, but they are not. I think they get dissed and talked about like they're a franchise a little different than they actually are. Like this year was a joke for them. They went 7-10, and Russell missed several games, and Geno had to start. That's the other part about last year, right? They went 7-10. They missed him for a while.
Right.
He didn't play all the games, and then by the time he got back and kind of got his mojo again, they did look pretty good down the stretch, right? They were playing good football the last couple of weeks because of him.
It's his first losing season
in his career, yeah, in the Pete Russell era.
11-5, 13-3, 12-4, 10. This is his QB record. 11-5, 13-3, 12-4, 10-6, 10-5, 9-7, 10-6, 11-5, 12-4, and then this year they were 6-8 with him as a starter.
Don't you think they get talked about like a 3 or 4 win team, not a team that was, probably a couple snaps away from being 500?
I think it's 2 things. I think it's one, like you said, the way they play. Like they play in some really bizarre games, lose some games you don't think they should.
Look weird.
They're fun. And I think thing number 2 is that specifically social media, kind of advanced metric Twitter, thinks Pete doesn't know how to run an offense.
All the elites on Twitter think Pete's the village idiot, even though he's won a Super Bowl, been to another, and won multiple national championships. But every fucking guy with 3 degrees that writes for their local newspaper with a blue check mark thinks Pete's an idiot. And listen, no coach is perfect, but
I don't think it's the local newspaper guys.
I'm the people that write for the blogs or what newspapers. I don't even know they exist. I'm just saying, like, we all know who we're talking about here.
But I'm just saying it's not. Yeah, it's not mostly it's specifically. I don't even want to denigrate it by saying analytics Twitter. It's not that simple, but
analytics Twitter is essentially these writers.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and I think that's where it comes from.
Brandon Staley's base. If Brandon Staley was a politician, his base.
There's a whole other AFC conversation coming, so we got some for Brandon Staley as well. But
I saw you remember how you brought up that Warren Sharp gambling article like a month ago in the New Yorker or whatever? People were like, the story no one's talking about with Calvin Ridley. Like he was into gambling and talking to offensive coordinators. I was like, this is Warren Sharp feels like kind of flying. Are the feds after him right now or something? It feels like he's disappeared.
Maybe Calvin was betting through him, or he was betting through Calvin.
Who knows?
Regardless. I can't believe. Can you believe this happened? I think sometimes we dive into like the topic. Can you believe Russell Wilson just got traded to the Broncos? He's going to be a Bronco.
There are obviously always wow moments in sports. It happens less and less, I'd say, in the NBA because these guys demand trades forever, and you just know they're going to get traded. In baseball, it's not as powerful as it probably was. I'd say they always had huge moments, like when we were growing up, in massive trades. I would say from a football standpoint, we've seen Jamal Adams get traded to Seattle, right? Jalen Ramsey. I remember Shady McCoy when Chip traded him. We've seen crazy trades in the NFL. I truly believe, guy, this is the biggest trade in NFL history when you factor in a quarterback in his prime. Like Montana was traded, but it felt like he was hanging on by a thread, and he only played 2 more seasons. Ultimately, Brady and Manning, Peyton Manning was cut by the Indianapolis Colts. Tom Brady became a free agent. And they, Tom obviously was in his 40s. Peyton was, we just didn't know if he was going to play again. His neck.
Yeah.
This to me is, I think sometimes it's hyperbole when you say this, but when has a player in his prime, definitely in the modern era, in the 2000s or the 2020s, this is easily I would say the biggest trade of the Roger Goodell NFL era, right? I mean, this guy's a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback that has minimum, you would say, 3-4 years left in his prime, Like, you have a good team around him, you can win the Super or compete to win the Super Bowl. Like, part of the reason is like, well, Seattle couldn't win a Super Bowl with Russ in his prime. Yeah, because they kept fucking up the draft picks and doing weird stuff. It wasn't because he was good enough to at least put them in competition. You and I watched, we've seen like, probably average 6-7 games. Anyone that lives on the West Coast, you've seen a lot of Russell Wilson games, and he is a spectacular player. I do believe to my core, listen, he can be a little weird, and like, will he show up to the Denver Bronco press conference with security? Who knows? But just
orange
as a player,
leather, 100% he's wearing orange leather.
As a player in a vacuum, he's one of the most remarkable talents I've ever watched. I find him just as an awesome, awesome player. Does he have some flaws? For sure, but he is. I still thought last year, like he had some down moments, but he's an elite player.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Like, people are mentioning the Herschel Walker trade, which was 18 picks or players, 18 elements got traded in that trade. Randy Moss was a big one. I think Tom, just as a free agent, you just talk about biggest moves in NFL history. Montana getting traded to the Chiefs.
Yeah. If you just if you just use our adult life, right?
Yeah. Brady but this is without question. I think part of it too is, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, one of the things the NFL has going for it is that it has these quarterbacks who are stars, and quarterbacks don't change teams. In the rare instances that even average quarterbacks change teams, like when Kirk Cousins changes teams, it's a big story. You don't get this a lot. When you get it, it's massive. Baseball has less stars because it has devalued starting pitching, and obviously the NBA stars are moving too much, and that creates an issue. The NFL has the sweet spot where it's got its stars. They don't change teams. Like, it'd feel weird if Rodgers and Russ had changed teams this year. Rodgers stays, Russ moves. And we'd been kind of ready. The Russ one had been bubbling for a little while. I think what you said about Russ saying he's in his prime is really interesting, because would you say if let's say Aaron got traded to the Broncos today instead of Russell Wilson, would you say Aaron Rodgers got traded in his prime?
I mean, he's won back-to-back MVPs.
Did I say Aaron Wilson? Aaron Rodgers?
But his age, it's different, 38 and 33.
Right. I mean, but he's playing at a higher level right now than Russ is. Russ is from an age standpoint.
Aaron's a better player than Russell Wilson.
Part of this is like, is Russ going to trim up a little and bounce back? I mean, he was 25 touchdowns, 6 picks. He was under 65%. I think everyone in Seattle that covered him felt like he was off this year. I felt like that watching him.
To piggyback off what you said, though, Rodgers really is, while there was a lot of drama surrounding it, the end result is what happens. When you have elite player at the quarterback, he just stays on the team. And I saw Peter King say, if you're 35 years old at the end of this contract, your entire life will be Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. You've had 2 quarterbacks your entire life. And that really is kind of the NFL, right? Tom Brady, while he ended up leaving, he left at 42 years old. Peyton Manning, like, they would not have cut him if they didn't think his neck was never going to work, right? Russell Wilson, part of this, ultimately he did stay there for 10 years, right? Like, ultimately, Kevin Durant, I think an underrated part about his career, he was in OKC, I think, for 9, right? It's not like he was there 3. He was there for a long period of time. Russell was in Seattle, right, for a decade. Mm-hmm. Like, that still is a long, it's not like he moved after 2 or 3 years. If Deshaun Watson moves teams, which feels likely at some point, that was a pretty short stint for a guy that's an elite player. Most teams that get a player of that caliber don't ever let him go for. Look at all the quarterbacks of Rodgers' era, right? Rivers, Roethlisberger, Eli. I mean, these guys minimum all the same team for 15 plus years. That to me is normal. That's what makes, like, I'm sorry, you can bring up Herschel Walker trades or any of these trades. If it does not involve a quarterback, it's not as big. Period, point blank, end of story.
I agree, although, when Herschel Walker got traded, running back.
Yeah. But that was when we were both 4,
Well, Jerry Jones still runs a team like that.
How?
I think Ezekiel's cap number is, what was it, $18 million?
But they traded Herschel Walker.
No, I know. I'm just saying he still values running backs.
Yeah, he does. That's true. And now he's had some sweet ones, right, Emmett?
Yes.
Zeke, in fairness to Zeke, I used to love young Zeke. He just fell off a cliff fast.
Somebody just tweeted at me, you guys said 4 1s for Russ. The Twitter handle is McDaniel's season. So Raider fan just tweeted at me, throwing it in our face that we said 4 1s for Russ.
I think most people thought something like that. I think it is pretty shocking.
We did say that. I'm stunned.
Now, to me, Noah,
it's hard to trade 4 1s because you can't trade more. You'd have to have multiple ones in a year, and Seahawks barely have 1-1, let alone 2-1s, right?
But you can trade 4.
But don't 2 of them have to be in the same year? You can't trade a 1 4 years out?
I thought 4 is the max. I thought.
Oh, I thought it was 3. Okay, maybe.
But why does Seattle matter that they don't have ones? Denver's the ones giving them, right?
Oh, yeah. In any event.
Yeah, to me, I think it's pretty wild. Now, I think the way you have to look at it is they got 2 1s and 3 2s. Because I do think at minimum that's Noah Fant's value. Like if Noah Fant's going to get traded, a young player at tight end that can fly, who was drafted I think he was picked 20. You would say he has there's value in him. Like he's getting valued in this trade. But to only have 2 1. But I would say this, like ultimately once you trade Russell, next year's one, we're all going to pick the Denver Broncos to make the playoffs, especially now with 7 seeds, right? So that pick is going to be in the 20s. So you would say the 3 1s, like, are you going to trade 3 years from now another pick in the 20s? Or what is my 9th overall draft pick worth to you? And that is valuable because you can ultimately turn 9. Look at last year, the New York Giants turned 11 into 20 and basically another first-round pick. And we know, who loves to trade back. Would it shock you if they go from 9 to 18 and gather another one and just start rebuilding this thing?
Now it wouldn't shock me. If you would given me that scenario before this trade, it would surprise me a little based on Pete's age. But it's not really the way, they've got DK, they've got Tyler Lockett. They don't have a ton of depth elsewhere, but
they didn't have a first round pick.
I know. Well, but I'm just saying, like, rebuild is like, are they really going to roll into the season with Drew Lock as their quarterback?
Well, the moment you trade Russell Wilson, unless you somehow they end up with Deshaun Watson, they're somewhat waving the white flag on their franchise, right?